Donk Nation, Jackson, Janet's greetings and welcome to the Daily Dose Donkey with Ginger. It's your boy, the Viking Donkey, bringing you some nonsensical Steelers talk. We're here in the off season, and still, not a lot of movement, still no Aaron Rodgers news, but we're getting close to the draft. So for this week, I'm gonna do a little quick draft look at, mocks of the Steelers' first round and some players maybe in the later rounds that I think would be cool and interesting for the Steelers to take a look at and potentially draft. And we will be ranking the Steelers' best punters of all time with the top five. Kind of a unique list and some weird stats in there that I didn't really know about. But let's start with the draft. Let's start what's going on. A lot of mock drafts see people like Will Johnson, a cornerback from Michigan, falling to the Steelers. We'll start with the picks I love. Will Johnson, cornerback from Michigan, falling to the Steelers. Wide receiver wise, the one that I like the most in the draft is Ibuka out of Ohio State. Reminds me a lot of Jackson Smith and Jigba. Very solid type of skill set. And you saw what he was able to do in Seattle. Also, the dream scenario, obviously, is Derek Harmon, the defensive lineman from Oregon, falling into the Steelers' lap. That dude just seems like the prototypical 3-4 end the Steelers love. Cam's getting up there in age. You got to find a way to replace whatever the heck is going on the other side. I mean, Ogunjobi is what it is. And those are the three guys that I've seen that I really enjoy in the mocks here. I've also seen guys like Matthew Golden mock to the Steelers, the wide receiver from Texas. Not a huge fan. Just a lot of quarterbacks, some running backs in there. If Genty falls, or the kid from North Carolina. But you know how I feel about running backs in the first round, so not going to do that. Also seen Siobhan Revel, the cornerback out of East Carolina there. Not a huge fan of his tape. But there is some guys out there that didn't get mocked to the Steelers that I kind of want to talk about. And those are mostly on the offensive line. I don't think it should be overlooked, the Steelers potentially picking an offensive lineman, and the ones that really look like they'll be there at the Steelers' pick seem to be Josh Simmons, Ohio State guy. These are offensive tackles, obviously. Armand Membu, offensive tackle from Missouri. But the two I really looked at and watched a little bit and seemed to stand out a little bit to me are guys like Gray Zabel, the offensive tackle from North Dakota State, more of a really developmental guy who I think has a lot of upside. And the one that I really would love to see them be able to go out and get, if he's still available, is Kelvin Banks Jr., offensive tackle from Texas. Really plays well, plays in that ability to give the Steelers the chance to move to a more up-tempo offense. And perhaps if Fontanu or any three of these guys could move inside. You could look at Banks moving inside to guard, or Fontana moving inside to guard, or Broderick Jones moving inside to guard. It gives a lot of flexibility there, and you get to let these guys fight it out and really add solid depth that's not currently there in the offensive line. And then, of course, we have to get to my least favorite idea, which is a quarterback in the first round. And, man, those have been all over the place. You're talking from Shadur Sanders to Jackson Dart to Tyler Slaw. I don't like it at all. I do think the Steelers should take a quarterback, but I think you look third, fourth round, and to me, Jalen Milroe. He's the quarterback I would love to see the Steelers take, but definitely not in the first round type of deal. Definitely the one who's number one on my list is Milroe. I like his ability out there to do it. I mean, the rest of the names on here, when you start getting down there, I mean, Will Howard has the arm to do it. There's a couple other in there, but outside of, and I like Cam Ward. I'm not sure I have him as a first round talent. I definitely don't want Sanders. I don't want Jackson Dart. I don't want a quarterback in the first round, if I'm going to be quite honest. I don't think any of these guys are really worth it. If for some reason Cam Ward fell that far, of course, take him. But outside of them, this is my least favorite mock scenario, is them getting in the quarterback in the first round. But then we got to talk about, if it's not a first round, who are some prospects maybe later in the draft we can get at all positions. I'll go through most of the positions that seem like positions of need. Obviously, quarterback, you still have Jalen Milroe. You still have Will Howard. If you're a Quinn Ewers fan or a Dylan Gabriel, the arm strength lacking type of guys. Curtis Rourke's in that group for quarterbacks who will probably be available. Running back wise, there's going to be some interesting ones. Don't know how quick Travion Henderson will go, but I like his overall game. Caleb Johnson out of Iowa. I love the pick for me here is one of these three guys for running backs. Cam Scadaboo out of Arizona State would be my number one guy. Dylan Sampson out of Tennessee. All that dude was be successful and score touchdowns. You also have a guy coming in a little later in there that will be found later in the draft due to his terrible run times. Ollie Gordon II out of Oklahoma State. But if you want some other mid-round guys who look like I think they could fit decently in what the Steelers want to do, I would look more for Devin Neal out of Kansas, DJ Giddens out of Kansas State type of guys that maybe could fit that role at running back. But Scadaboo for me would be the one to get later in the draft. Wide receiver wise, you're talking later in the draft. I like the size and shiftiness of guys like Isaiah Bond to be a slot guy, the toughness of a guy like Xavier Restrepo from Miami, and really a guy who I would love to see them go after late in the draft, hopefully 5th, 6th round, is if Brew McCoy, the wide receiver out of Tennessee, stays there, 6'3", big body, big target guy. That's who I would look for in the wide receiver position. I think we're set in tight end. I talked about the offensive lineman I like, and there's not I haven't done a huge amount of research into the offensive line because that's more I'll see who they take and see if I like him type of deal. But when you get to the defensive line, this is where some names really start to come up of guys who have the size. I mean, you have Joshua Farmer out of Florida State, J.J. Peggies out of Ole Miss. You have guys like Vernon Broughton out of Texas. These big size guys who seem to fit what the Steelers do. Instead of drafting one of these smaller guys, this is the year to go out, get that guy who's the prototypical size. Cam Jackson out of Florida is another one. There's a lot of bigger framed defensive linemen to have this year. That's what the Steelers need. They really need to double up on that, in my opinion. And those are ones that I'm looking at in the later rounds, were the ones aforementioned. We get to linebacker. We can argue whether or not they need to add one, getting hopefully healthy this year and add into the position in the offseason. But if they do decide later round to take a chance on someone, there's two you have to take a chance on, and it's purely because their name, and that's Power Echols out of North Carolina, and of course a guy who lives up to his name, and Bam Martin Scott out of South Carolina. Two physical linebackers who might be there day 3 of the draft and be pretty, hopeful type of guys. You get to edge rushers. I don't really know late in the one who will be there, but you get a guy like either of the dudes from Ole Miss, really. Princely Umamalayan or Jared Ivey are pretty good ones out there. Baron Sorrell out of Texas has the little bit bigger size, a little bit more ability in the run stop type of thing of guys who might be there later. You get to corners, because cornerbacks is a position the Steelers definitely need to address, and there are some late round guys who could be very interesting. But to me, the two I would focus on probably is watching a lot of Kobe Bryant from Kansas go out there. Really good ball skills, the type of guy who can make a difference on it would be cool to see. And Jason Marshall Jr., a more developmental type of guy to get in there, and with bringing in some veterans now, the type of guy you could probably take a chance on. And I think that about covers every position that I think the Steelers should be looking at. Of course, we'll break down the late round draft picks. We'll break down every draft pick after the draft. Maybe we'll get a little bit in before. But it's about that time to get interested in all these guys, figure out what's going on. And once we draft them, get into the tape, see what you got, and feel if this is a person who really can make first, make it in the NFL. Second, make it in the system the Steelers use. And three, can they be a person that enhances what the Steelers currently do? I think it's going to be really interesting. It's going to be a cool time. But without further ado, let's get out there. Let's talk about Steelers punting. I think there's a trifecta at the top that really you can put in any order you want based off what you've seen. And very sad that big old fat punter Presley Harvin doesn't get to make this list. Although when you look at his actual overall numbers, they're not terrible compared to some of the punters in Steelers history. Biggest problem for him is just didn't get it done on a consistent basis. Very inconsistent. So not gonna let him make my list. Guys like Daniel Sepulveda, who I remember as being a big hitting punter, not quite making this list. Guys with the best yards per punt for the Steelers are ironically the two highest average punting Steelers were the two punters on last year's roster. That, of course, is Cameron Johnston and Corliss Waitman. So, of course, if either of them stay, they both have a chance to really, really rocket up this list. I had to give a shout out on this list to a guy named Shorty McWilliams, the punter in 1950 for the Steelers. Like that's just a great name to have out there. Just you can't be mad about that. One who hit an 82-yard punt, which was the longest in Steelers history, just longer than the 79-yarders by Jordan Berry and Drew Butler. And there's a few in there with mid 70s and all sorts of fun names getting thrown around in Steelers history. Of course, you have Ben Roethlisberger, who had some punts in there, but no, he did not qualify for this list. I believe Cordell Stewart, at some point in his career, also had a pretty long punt, if I'm not mistaken, but maybe I'm way off on that. But going back through Steelers history and punters, kind of a hodgepodge of goodish for the time, but not good for long terms, I guess. I don't know how you really want to phrase this stuff. So we'll go ahead and we'll start the list. We'll start the list at let's go number 5 here. And this was just a toss up to more old-timey, not even more old-timey, I guess, punters in the era when the Steelers weren't necessarily a great football team, the early 90s, or excuse me, the 80s here, and that's Harry Newsome. He comes in 5th all-time in Steelers history, so we'll leave him there. That seems a good spot. Then we get to Jordan Berry, a person I remember watching punting. A kind of underrated guy, 44 yards a punt, 40% of his punts inside the 20. Very, very solid career. Of course, a Steeler from 2015 to 2020. It was good to see him out there. Bobby Walden, the Steelers' all-time leader in punting yards. He goes ahead and takes number 3 for me on the list. Dude averaged 41.1 yards a punt, punting through 68 through 77. So, got to see some Super Bowl rings in there. Really didn't track touchdown percentage and in-20 percentage that much, it seems, because the numbers are very askew in there. But Walden's one of the three-headed monsters. The second of the three-headed monster is, of course, a great one in Steelers history. That's Craig Colquitt for me. 41 yards a punt, 26 inside there. Punter from 78 to 84. Third all-time in Steelers punting history. But, he kind of led a family of punters to be, let's just say, going through out there. It ran in their history. But for me, without a doubt, the number one punter in Steelers history has to be Josh Miller. I remember him being the dude who was like the savior early in my time being a Steelers fan. Offense wasn't necessarily great. This dude was the offense, allegedly, by flipping field position and doing all sorts of awesome stuff. Second all time in Steelers punting yards with an average of 42.9 per punt, put 33% of his punts inside the 20, and had a season where you could argue he should have been the offensive MVP because it was just so terrible to watch it that year. So there you go. That's our Steelers punter rating. Let me know what you think about him. Let me know if I messed up really bad, if there's someone that I clearly forgot who is maybe like just a 2-3 year wonder that should be put on the list. Let me know if you think these new guys are going to stay here, either whether it's Johnston or Corliss Waitman, is going to stay here long enough to become the guy who's going to make this list and move it up a little bit because they do something incredible, baby. There's someone who is really good at fake punts that I didn't know about that should belong on this list. Let's just call it that way. In terms of shout outs, this is a weird time of year, not a whole heck of a lot going on. So I'm going to go ahead and because I think this is the direction the Steelers should look improving that defensive line. I'm just going to give a shout out to one of my favorite Pittsburgh Steeler first round draft picks, I believe he was, and that's Big Ham, Casey Hampton from the University of Texas. Let's go get us another dominating run stopper in the draft this year. Now I gotta let you know I'm the Viking Donkey. That's Viking_Donkey on Twitch and Twitter. Your Daily Dose Donkey with Ginger is an awesome YouTube channel where you get this sweet content. Don't worry, Gingy will be back at some point. Laskers will be back at some point. Who knows when that is? But until then, I will do my best to give you all the best breakdowns I can. We'll keep the list going. I think we're going to get to a little more maybe entertaining and break away from the player-based list into something a little different on a list coming here in the next couple weeks. We're going to keep it nonsensical. You keep the comments coming. Tell us what you like, what you don't like, what you want to see in the future. So Donk Nation, Steeler Nation, it's that time to wave them if you got them. Get ready for draft time. Let's go Steelers.